Hey, Jake Willens here, your writing and wellness guy. Today I'm going to talk about how to set up your quotes with the right amount of context and how to integrate your quote so that your words flow into the quote seamlessly and fluidly. Before you give quotes in your essays, you want to give a little bit of context to the reader. You don't want the quotes to come out of nowhere and just appear. The reader needs to know what's the scene, who's talking to whom, is it the narrator? Remember here, quotes don't necessarily have to be people talking in dialogue. All a quote means is that you took it directly from the book. It could be narration or the author talking. But before quotes, you always want to give a little bit of context. Some quotes might need 2 to 3 sentences of context. Other quotes you might be able to do in 1 or 2 sentences. If you're going beyond 3, 4 sentences of context, you might have too much, and you might be too plot-driven. Similarly, if you just have like half a sentence and the quote just appears, you might need a little bit of more context. Generally, after you set the context, after you set the scene so the reader knows what quote you're taking and from where, you want to integrate your quote. By integrate, it means bring together. What are you bringing together? You're bringing together your words into the quote. When it's most fluidly integrated, it should be hard if you read it out loud to tell where your words end and the quote starts. So if it's fluidly integrated, it isn't very jarring when the quote begins. Now, the easiest way to do it, and the simplest way, probably not always the best way, is to say something like, he states, the writer writes, Ponyboy replies, etc. You don't want to do all of your quotes that way, but it's not the end of the world if you do 1 or 2 like that. For instance, if I said, at the start of the novel, Ponyboy says, when I stepped out in the bright sunlight, you wouldn't need more context there, because it's the very beginning of the novel, so the reader knows that. And you can see how it just goes right into the quote. For To Kill a Mockingbird, if I said at the end of the novel, Atticus tells Scout, most people are nice when you finally see them. That's basically the simplest way to integrate. At least you didn't start the sentence with a quote. You said he says, he replies, he states, but you want to vary the way you integrate. Just like your sentence structure, you want dynamic diversity. One way to do it would be a colon. A colon is a great way to integrate because it means what I'm just saying will be shown in the following passage. So it's kind of a trick and an easy way to do it. For instance, if I said, if you scroll down, if I said the following would not, you also want to, in addition to the colon, you want to know how much context to provide. For instance, if I said in the To Kill a Mockingbird quote, Atticus in the closing statement, during the trial Atticus mentions that our courts have their faults. The trial goes about 4 chapters in that book, so you probably want to get more specific with the context. If I did too much, it might say something like, at the end of the trial, Atticus is speaking to the jury. The reader has just heard all the testimony and he wants to convince them to convict. He makes many points about equality. He makes a compelling closing statement and mentions. That's probably too much context. It's a little bit plot-driven. A good middle ground, sweet spot, would be at the end of the novel, at the end of the trial, Atticus makes a compelling closing argument as to why he should not be convicted. He speaks about the values that make our country great and assures the jury that our courts, and then see the above quote. So that would be a really good amount of context because it's one clear sentence to set the scene, and then the second sentence integrates into the quote. You do want to consult your teacher. Some teachers like more context, other teachers like less context. Generally, context is the one time where plot is okay. You don't want your essays to be too plot-driven, but you do need a little bit of plot before a quote, just so the reader knows where it is in the book. Now, sometimes you're setting up a back and forth. Either it's a play or a novel. Usually you don't have to quote both. Usually you pick either the first person or the second person, which is most important, and then the other part you set up in your words. For instance, if Josefina said, what did you learn about yourself in middle school and high school? And Claudia said, I learned I have to trust myself, be true to who I am, and be okay making mistakes as I grow. How can I set that up? I could say something like, in the scene where Josefina asked Claudia to reflect on the lessons from middle school, Claudia points out she learned I have to trust myself. Here the response was the more quote-worthy part. The first part I just put in my words in the context. I didn't need to quote it. Another example, if Carlos asked LeBron, what have you learned? And LeBron said, it's important to take care of yourself, get enough sleep, eat well, practice diligently, and exercise in order to thrive. And then Carlos agrees. Here's how you could set it up. When asked by Carlos what he has learned, LeBron emphasizes, then you give the quote, and in your analysis, you could talk about how Carlos agrees with him. You wouldn't need to quote Carlos. LeBron's middle statement is the most important one. So you generally can choose which is most vital. Now, occasionally, if you scroll down, occasionally you do want to quote both. Let's say in Inherit the Win, when Brady asked Drummond, is it possible that something is holy to the celebrated agnostic? And Drummond shouts, yes, the individual human mind. Here, both of those quotes are so vital to the character and the themes of the play that you'd actually want to quote both. So you have to kind of decide, how vital is it? Can I just quote one? Or in this case, you'd want to quote both, because they both reveal a lot about character and a lot about theme. If you please scroll down, we can go even further. Keep going. Next, I'm going to talk about ellipses and brackets. Ellipses are the three dots, and you can use those in the middle of a quote when you want to take something out. So let's say the first sentence is really good, and then there's one sentence that you don't really need, and then the third sentence is good. You can use ellipses in the middle to take it out. You never need ellipses at the start or end of a quote, because it's implied you can start the quote wherever you want, and something could come after. You can end it wherever you want. So the only time you need ellipses are in the middle. Here is an example of ellipses. In a separate piece, when Gene is talking about the tree, and he goes on to say, they're not merely small in relation, but that are absolutely smaller. Here the writer took out a sentence or two. And then he said, so the more things stay the same, the more they change. Here the middle part was omitted. Now, you don't just take out the middle part because you don't feel like typing it out. You take it out because it wasn't that important to the quote. If you scroll down, you can use brackets to clarify. Brackets mean they're your words, they're not the quote. So if you want to clarify something, for instance, in Lord of the Flies, maybe it is only us. Here the writer shows the beast, the fear, the things falling apart, because the it wasn't clear from the way he set up the quote, or she set it up. So you want to use brackets to clarify. You want to use ellipses to take out. If you scroll down, keep going. Here the writer said, oh, keep going even further, even further, even further. Keep going. Now, when you integrate a quote, grammar, you want to have proper grammar when you integrate a quote. You can't just start the quote with your words, throw in a comma, and then put the quote and say, oh, there, it's integrated. It actually has to make sense grammatically and flow. For instance, if I said, when Scout is complaining to Atticus about her teacher, Atticus wants her to learn a certain lesson, if you can learn a simple trick. If you read that out loud, you can tell it doesn't flow. Number one, it's a run-on. Number two, it just doesn't flow grammatically. So you want to read it out loud. If I said, when Scout is complaining about her teacher, Atticus tells her that, quotes, if you can learn a simple trick. Now we have a fluid sentence that is grammatically correct. So when you're integrating your quote, don't throw grammar rules out the window. Similarly, you don't need a comma before every quote, only if the comma actually belongs there. If MLK talks about what he hopes for America, I have a dream. That doesn't flow. MLK speaks about what he hopes for America. He goes on to say, I have a dream. Now we have a fluid sentence. MLK talks about what he hopes for America, colon. Remember the colon. It means what I just said will be shown in the following passage. It's a really handy way to vary your integration. You don't want to do it always in the same way. You want variety. If you scroll down, Ponyboy comes to learn that past tense versus present tense. You're writing your literature in present tense, but sometimes quotes are in past tense. For me, I say that's a writer's choice. You can keep the quote in past tense. You don't have to change it. Or you can change it by using brackets so that your verbs line up. I would say consult your teacher on that. Some teachers want you to leave the quote as the original past tense, even if it's not consistent with yours. Other teachers want you to actually change it to present tense. I say consult your teacher, or what do you think sounds more powerful? Similarly, third person. You're writing in the third person. You're not saying I think in my essays. You're keeping it in the third person. But quotes might be first person. Ponyboy comes to realize that I now know. Now, I'm okay with keeping the quote in the first person. Some teachers, though, want you to change it to third person with brackets. I'd say that's a writer's choice, but make sure to consult your teacher. Here would be an example of switching it to third person. Ponyboy comes to realize that he now knows. You see how I had to use brackets to show the change, okay? We're going to scroll all the way down to citing. Keep going to citation. How do you cite your quotes? Quote par punct. Quote par punct. What does that mean? Quote, parentheses with the page number, and then punctuation at the end. Usually it's just like this. I love yoga. Quote, 68, period. There's no exclamation mark or no punctuation mark before the parentheses or before the quote ends. The only time you need punctuation is either when it's an exclamation or a question. Then that would go inside the quote. I love yoga, but you still put a period at the end because you started the sentence in your words. Remember integration? So you still need the period after the parentheses. You love yoga, there was a question mark inside of the quote, but the period still goes after the parentheses, okay? Make sure to consult your teacher because some teachers like MLA citation, which I gave, others like endnotes or footnotes, so make sure to consult your teacher, okay? So anyway, I hope this was helpful on quote setup. Remember, give a little bit of context, give a sentence or two, set the scene, don't make the quote come out of nowhere. Integrate your quotes, have it fluidly lead from your words into the quote, and try to do it in a variety of ways. That makes your writing dynamic and it'll take you from good to great. So thank you, keep grappling, and namaste.